What's up, everybody? My name is Del. This is Del on Movies, and thanks for hanging out with me. If you've been here before, thanks for hanging out with me again. And this is another episode of Movie Swap. And for right now, we're starting a few minutes late. We were doing some things on another channel actually, and I'll tell you more about that a little bit later. So I'm waiting on my guests to arrive, but I didn't want to leave you guys hanging. And I just want to say thank you for coming again, if I didn't already say it. And I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm dealing with a little bit of a cold. Hopefully, I'll be able to keep it together while we're on here. And since we're just hanging out for right now, guys, if you have any questions for me, just feel free to lob them at me, and I'll give you some answers. And I will check in with the chat to see who is hanging out right now. And Adrian James is up first. He says, "Hey, how's it going, Dell?" And my guest again will be here very shortly, and it's going pretty good right now. So I am excited to get to it. Movies with Ryan. Ryan says, "I wonder what 80s or 90s movie Dell got John to watch." You are in for a bit of a surprise as far as what I got John to watch. I will suffice it to say that I'm hoping Tim from Tim Talks Talkies pops in to see where we went with tonight's swap. Ryan, is that 1880s or 1890s? Hey, probably closer than 1990s. LOL. And he picked Man Riding Bicycle. I've not seen if that's even a thing. Hey, Caprice is here. Says, "Hey Del, how you doing?" And yes, we're definitely gonna try to get you up here at some point. My boy, my buddy KB is here. Plaidx2 gives great movie recommendations. Yes, he does. Absolutely. And KB also says he hopes I'm feeling better. Thank you. I really hope to feel better. And I'm a big fan of not really putting all my business out in the street, but I'm gonna put my nephew on blast. For those of you who don't know, I went on vacation to the beach over the weekend, and it was my family, and it was also my sister and her family, and then I have a brother, two more brothers, and we all went. And my nephew came down with the cold or flu or something, and when I left there, coming home, I felt great. Next morning, just about everybody in the house is kind of sniffling and coughing right now. So fingers crossed, this passes pretty quick. All right, so we got some folks saying all hello to one another, especially to Caprice, of course. And James is in the house. He says, "Good evening, Dell and John and everybody." And thank you for coming out tonight, James. Really appreciate it. And hi again, James and KB. And that was weird. Oh, that was weird. Weird thing. Weird. Sorry for that silence, guys. Some weird thing just happened. I'm clicking away here, going through the comments, and one of those pop up boxes just popped up on my laptop. And as I was clicking the next comment, that popped up. So I apologize for that pause there, because I had to figure out what happened. And yeah, James, I'm trying to feel better, man. I'm really trying. Caveman is here. He says, "Hey, two of my favorite groovy cats. What's going on, Caveman?" And if you're not a fan, subscriber of Caveman, go ahead and check his channel out. Lots and lots of fun. And I'm gonna have him up here at some point. Also, some more folks saying hey. And right now, I'm gonna pause the chat here, guys, because my guest has arrived, and his channel is Plaidx2, and he is John, and he is has the smoothest voice outside of KB. So the two of those guys, they have the most amazing voices in Bluetooth, the Bluetoothverse. So let's go ahead and pull in John. What's going on, man?
Well, I'm just working on my album. KB and I are dropping an album soon, so.
No, I'm telling you, man, it's like Barry White times two over there with you guys.
That's hilarious. That's good, man.
Oh yeah. So John, go ahead and tell everybody all about yourself.
I've got my own channel, the Plaidx2 channel. We talk about movies, music, and books. It's primarily movies. But yeah, we talk about all three of those things. Probably music would be the second thing. Books are in and out every once in a while. Always enjoy chatting with people in the community. So we've got a series called The Five that you'll be seeing my friend Del on very, very soon. And so yeah, that's kind of what we're doing.
Oh, absolutely. So my question for you, I always like to start with something that's not related to what we're talking about. The movies we're gonna talk about tonight, and I watched your latest video, and I told you I was gonna steal the idea. You did all
Oh
your
yeah.
King Kong and Godzilla movies. You did that collection. I have a lot of both. There's one Godzilla movie in particular. Well, there's two, but there's one movie in particular that everybody else loves. I cannot stand that movie. You seem to really like this movie, so I want you to sell me on this movie, Godzilla. I guess 2014,
2014.
the first of the new Godzilla movies.
I'm not sure if I'm the best person to sell you on it. I wouldn't say it's a film I'm nuts about, but I like think the cast. I like the cast. I think it stands out like as a modern day kind of a take on it. That doesn't look. It looks very different. I think than like Godzilla versus Kong, that most recent film. Like
Mhm.
that is. It looks different. It looks a little grittier. So yeah, again, it wouldn't be a film that would be in my top 100 of
Right.
films. But yeah, I like it. I saw somebody else post on there that they hear that film gets knocked all the time too, and they love it too. So yeah. So what's your what part of it do you struggle with, not a fan of?
Well, for starters, it's a Godzilla movie almost without Godzilla.
That's
That
true. That is
that's
true.
that's a big thing, and and not only that, because I get it. He has. I think I saw like 11 minutes of screen time, but it's almost like the movie goes out of its way to not show Godzilla do Godzilla things. For instance, my this is just it's there's a scene where Godzilla and the other monster they're getting ready to fight, and we stay with the humans on the ground, which is a bit of an issue because these human characters I don't like, and they are running away from the fight as they should be, but the camera goes with them and follows them into this building, and the door closes on the fight, and my heart just sank at that moment. Like, oh, what are we doing here?
Right.
I was frankly bored by the movie for 2 hours.
So it feels like for you like a ton of build up, but like the show doesn't happen.
Yeah, yes, that's a great way to put it. Yes,
Gotcha.
all build up and no show. It just
We're like the last one, Godzilla versus Kong, is just all just duking it out. Like it's
yes,
nonstop.
and unsurprisingly, I like that one a
I
lot.
love it too.
All right, so let's talk about the five for a second. How did that come about? How did you decide on doing that?
um,
And
so
kind of filling people in on what it is first. I'm sorry.
yeah, no. So the five is I have 5 questions and I invite people on, and for each question, the guest responds with 5 films. And the point of it is to talk movies because all of us could talk movies forever. The other part is get 25 film recommendations. I watch, especially this time of year, the Criterion recommendation videos. I'm watching those all day long. Um, but the other part, honestly, is you get to know the other collector better. And so it's interesting. Sometimes you start talking about, especially films that have impacted you, and sometimes these conversations have gone off to pretty deep conversations about this was my childhood. This is what I experienced. These are some of my hurts. These are some of, and all of a sudden we get beyond movies. The lead in was movies, but now we're just talking about our real lives and things that we struggle with, things that we've hurt, how we've hurt, and then things that matter to us, like things that bring us joy. Like this is, and so you start finding out about people's history, but you all start finding out about what brings light and life into people. And they're like, this is what makes me laugh. This is what gives me hope. And so I like it that I get to meet collectors on a level that's goes maybe a little bit deeper than just we like movies kind of a thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I've really enjoyed the series. I hope you keep this up as long as possible,
Yeah.
with as many guests as possible. And one of my favorite of your guests and friends is Stephanie of Movie Chatter.
She's the best.
She is the absolute best. She is the person who she's one of the people I would say who really got me to uh do a channel. And I've never spoken to Stephanie, not
Wow.
once. Um but she was one of the first people who I came across when I was kind of getting into Bluetooth thing, because I've been collecting forever, but and I did not know that people went on YouTube and talked about their collections or their movies or anything. And I kind of stumbled across a few people, and then I got recommended. You know how YouTube works. She was one of those recommendations, and then I watched one of her videos, and I watched a few more. And so she's always the person who I feel like she's one of the people that I kind of try to emulate, because I just like her style so much.
Yeah.
I'm sure it is a very poor imitation. But in my mind, that's one of the people that I kind of take after. And I say all that to say, how did you guys get hooked up?
You know what? Similar to you, I was when I first started watching some channels. Stephanie was one of the first channels. There's probably 5 to 7 channels I was watching. Hers was one of the first ones. I loved her style. One of her gifts is, and I don't have this, I can't do it. She will describe a film, a recommendation, and she is like drawing people in. Like people are like, oh my gosh, I want to see this. But she didn't give away anything. And I'm terrible
Yes.
at that. I give clues away, and I'm not trying to, I just can't help it. And then this happened. And Stephanie's got an amazing gift of just explaining it, and you're in, and then she's like, and you should watch it.
Yeah.
And then my Amazon wish list is the size it is because of her videos and our conversations. But it was that. Also, she's just like a super genuine, kind human being. Like, so we've become friends, and we chat on Instagram constantly, and we talk about movies a lot of times, but a lot of times it's just life. And she's just become a really, really good friend. She's just super kind. She's very smart. Like, and you know that when you watch her videos, she's just so smart. Really, really funny, really kind, compassionate. She's just a good human being. And I don't know about you, man, but it's just like, I like surrounding myself with just good humans.
Yes.
Like, and she's one of those people, and she loves movies, and I've learned so much from her. So yeah, she's just become a great friend, man.
Yeah, cool. All right, so let's take a stroll through the chat again one last time before we get started on the reason that we're here. And Ryan is here. He says hi, James. Again, they're kind of going back and forth with each other, saying hi. And Caprice agrees with me. She says, "Ooh, KB voice, dang, love it." And KB says, "Yes, sir. Album dropping soon with Cody on 3 features." Yes. Are you familiar with Cody?
Possibly.
The dude who loves movies. That's Cody.
Yeah. I do know him. Yes.
Yes, and he's in that voice club too. Absolutely. He's
That's funny.
absolutely in it. Tony's here. What's going on, Tony? Says hi, guys. I gotta pick at Tony a little bit. He's been engaging in a lot of silliness here lately. So Tony will, I'm sure, get a kick out of that. And everybody, of course, is saying hi to Tony and Uncle Tony. And Ryan says he's KB the DJ, I'm the rapper, and that's John. I'd listen to it. That is for anybody out there who doesn't really know, that's a Fresh Prince and a Jazzy Jeff from Fresh Prince reference from, I think it was their first album. He's the DJ, I'm the rapper. And yeah, that was years before any slapping happened. Yes. Adrian says, I still enjoy the 90s Godzilla with Matthew Broderick, 98 Godzilla. Ooh, how do you feel about that one, John?
That's been a long time. What I like most about that film is the soundtrack.
Yeah, good soundtrack.
More than the film.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that. I would definitely agree with that. Caprice loves that one too. The Monkey is here. Adrian, yes, that's my favorite Godzilla movie as well. Watched it 78 times this year already. Wow. Oh my goodness. Wow. That is dedication, my friend. That is That is true dedication. There are lots and lots of people who have not seen 78 movies yet this year. Mama
I have not.
Blu-ray is here. Hey, Mama Blu-ray, a big supporter of lots of channels, including mine. Thank you very much, as always. She's got a big night tonight. Movies and Sue going into uh, Bob's Hall of Fame.
Yes.
So if you are even if you're not a fan, if you know Sue at all, just after we're finished here, and I understand some of you might leave here to go check it out, but check it out. Sue is another one of those really nice, really genuine people. Laren is here. What's going on? He says, "Hey, Dell and John, I'm going to listen while driving." All right. Well, we're going to try to make it an entertaining drive for you. And Ryan says, "John, your movie rec almost had me crying on my Asian live stream. Ocean's Heaven was a great one." I haven't watched it yet, so I'm looking forward to that. And just
incredible.
Yeah, just kind of skipping around now to see everybody saying hi to each other. And of course, Laren, eyes on the road. I agree with Holland right there. Definitely eyes on the road, but keep your ears open. Keep your ears open. And Caveman says smooth talkies with two great vocalists. KB loves movies, and John Plaidx2 think Barry White or Chef from South Park. Isaac Hayes, yes, the inside joke.
That's hilarious.
Which means Ken, because of Kenny, doesn't live well in South Park. Absolutely. I haven't watched South Park in so many years, though. Good Lord. Haven't started driving yet, distracted by my friends here in the chat. All right, you got to stop typing here, Larry. You know, put 10 and 2, buddy. 10 and 2. All right. Caprice, I'm okay. I'm on my way to see my brother's band play and hang out with some friends. Normal Wednesday night for me. Very cool. All right, so let's get to why we're here. John, if you can tell the people what movie you recommended for me to watch and give us a brief synopsis.
All right. So I gave Dell a list of 10, and for those of you wondering, no, they weren't all from the 30s. There were some modern films, but I was very excited when you chose the film that you did choose, which is Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and I've got it here on VHS,
yeah,
and on Blu-ray here. So Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is 1939. You've got James Stewart. Let me see who's the best. There we go. James Stewart, he ends up getting brought on to be a senator. A senator passes away. And so people in power are looking for just somebody who will do whatever they want them to do and just kind of be in there. So he has no experience. He is just super innocent, idealistic. And so they get him in there. And while he's in there, he discovers something that he doesn't think is okay and starts fighting for it. And it's kind of a bit of the film itself, if you've never seen it, it was nominated for 11 Academy Awards. It actually was banned in places. Third highest grossing film of that decade. People didn't like it because they called out corruption in the government. And so a lot of people didn't like the film and struggled with the film. People in government, senators, saw a preview of it. They did not like it, but it makes you think. I was thinking about it today. It's kind of Rage Against the Machine before Rage Against the Machine from the 1930s, fighting power and corrupt power. So anyway, if that's it, and Jean Arthur, who is all-time favorite, she's in there as well.
Okay. No, I did not know. I've heard of the movie. Obviously, I do know the movie. Very familiar with the movie and its status as an all-time great, but I didn't know that it had been banned in places. So you just taught me something there. I had no clue on that one.
Yeah, the government didn't like it because it portrayed the government in a negative light, that there was corruption there. And these films, especially in this time period, everything is beautiful and wonderful and sugary. And they came out and said, no, it's not. And so it was a film that was attacked. And it's ranked number 26 on the AFI list. Like, it's highly regarded.
Yes.
But it was very much attacked by people in power because they didn't like it, saying you're not as innocent as you are portraying yourself to be.
Yeah, exactly. So, Jimmy Stewart, how much do you? Not how much, but how? Okay, let me rephrase it. How much do you think he was picked because He's a great actor, and how much do you think he was picked because of the persona of Jimmy Stewart?
Um, I mean, I think he blew up later on, so I don't think it was like you're signing a
Okay.
monster A-lister. I think you're right. What you're saying about like his natural, like just gentleman kind of like I don't know what's going on here. I think there is a lot of that why he would get picked because he was perfect for that role. Like
Mhm.
just idealistic, super innocent, um, patriotic. I think there is a lot of that. It's just kind of the vibe. He's the everyman. He's like the Tom Hanks of the 30s, you know?
Yes, yes, because I have often heard Tom Hanks referred to as the Jimmy Stewart of our
Yeah.
time, and yeah, definitely I get that. Um, as far as his performance goes, so I'm pretty sure you're saying you think that it's a great performance.
I think so. I think it's yes. I yeah, I think it's a what I don't think I think Gene's performance is a better acting performance.
I would
Um
agree with that. Yes.
by far, and that's not just because I love Gene. But again, this would have been earlier in his career. So in 2 years, he was actually going to sign up into the military himself, and his career kind of came to a halt for a little while as he served the country. And so yeah, and then he came back, and It's a Wonderful Life. You
Mhm.
see a grittier Jimmy Stewart there,
Yeah.
but he's
Yeah.
experienced life that he didn't experience before he filmed this film. So there's a difference in him as a human post his service for the country. Um, yeah,
Even in It's a Wonderful Life, though, he still maintains a sense of innocence,
sure. Yeah,
and I think that is the greatest strength of him as a character, and one that would later be exploited by Hitchcock. Um, but that for me, that is his greatest strength. He comes on the screen, and I kind of chuckle to myself because it's like every line that he says could have either began or ended with "G Willikers." He's the kind of guy.
absolutely,
Yeah, absolutely.
absolutely.
So so yeah, he was a perfect fit for this type of character.
Yes.
Um, what I found was that the movie is sadly and strangely relevant still.
Oh, big time.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is big time. And the thing is, it's kind of in our face now, with what's going on with our last president. So it's kind of in our face all the time, every day, right now. But I don't think this is a movie that's ever not been relevant. To be honest with you,
Sadly.
I'm not sure if you feel the same way about that.
Yeah, and I think like when you're watching the film, obviously they're talking about so all of a sudden money, the government wants to change the narrative of what the country believes is true.
Mhm.
And so you have these people with money controlling politicians and power. And so power matters, prestige matters, position matters, money matters. And so they in the film they're shutting down newspapers, they're taking over radio stations. And for the 1939, that's social media. Newspaper and radio
Yeah.
is social media. So it absolutely translates to today because people in power purchase those things and control the narrative. And so what ways are you able to get information or truth in a way that isn't controlled? And that's incredibly difficult to do. But it was interesting seeing it here. And when I was watching it, I was watching it as a refresher for this conversation. And I was like, that's just social media. That's just
Yeah.
social media in 1939.
Yes, yes, and I mean there are characters in the movie, the puppeteers, so to speak. They're purposely saying, "Hey, don't print anything he's saying at all, and or don't print this, just print this part, or spin the story this way." And it's something like so we think that it's such it's a modern thing because of social media and everybody has their opinion out there immediately. But again, this is something that's always gone on. It's just in different formats. In this case, newspaper and radio. And that's what really kind of stuck with me throughout the movie. It was like, wow, this is just so pertinent to what we're dealing with now, and really at any time during my life. Bringing it back to a surface level, I guess. Um, we have the story playing out, and we almost have a choir in the little boys.
Yeah.
They're almost like a choir. They pop up every now and then to say something and nudge the narrative a little bit. And what did you think of those guys?
I mean, it definitely leans into the aw shucks thing, the G
Yeah,
Willigers,
yeah,
because they're in the upper area cheering him on. Even the little fella who was helping him, like beside his desk, going, "Hey, you should do this. This is what you do. This is where this is." And then when they had the opportunity to kind of like go around the mainstream media to go to that little newspaper he was publishing back in his home
right,
state, it's the young boys who go out and do that.
right.
So it was funny. It was definitely the Boy Scouts unite to fight for the good.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, it was funny, and I think classic of that era too,
Hmm.
where you have a group of kids do something, who are present there.
In a lot of movies, when that happens, I mean, it's just boys, you know.
Yeah,
But in this particular case, and when I say just boys, I don't mean there were no girls. Which obviously, there were not. But what I mean is that it's not supposed to be indicative of anything else. It's just a group of boys. In this case, though, I really saw it as um, symbolizing the working class, or the little people, so to speak. It's like, okay, the big time politicians are not going to get it done. We have to get it done. The little guys are going to get it done.
yeah. And it was interesting because Jimmy Stewart a couple of times, I think two, maybe three times, mentions that this is not about one group of people. He's like all creeds, all nationalities, all races. Like he keeps two or three times, he keeps including this is about all of us, and this is about us being together.
Mhm.
And yeah, and that is, I think there's a lot of films I've seen maybe that have not done that at least as well or as intentional as it seemed this film attempted to do.
Right. Uh, so we also have, you've already mentioned, but his handler, so to speak, or his secretary, I guess, what her title is, but she's really his handler, and she is very clearly jaded by her time in DC, when we meet her. And as the movie goes along, she, starts to believe a little more in our guy. And I'm not trying not to spoil it in case there anybody who hasn't seen it. But she does become an ally for him, almost reluctantly, begrudgingly. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
where do you stand on her character arc? Because I thought, for me, that was the best character arc in the movie and led to her giving the best performance.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, I think she was someone who was absolutely critical and was definitely beat down by everything she's seen. And what I love about her character is I think she sees a glimmer of hope in Jimmy Stewart. Like maybe everything isn't so cynical. Maybe everything isn't so, because she was sarcastic.
Hmm.
Everything is just, this is how it's just going to be. And I think in him, she saw it's possible there is good. It's possible things could change, maybe. And so you're right. I'm just a monster Gene Arthur fan,
Yeah.
but she kind of, yeah, she goes from, but even early on, she was protecting him because he was talking about that land and she didn't want to let him know, like, oh, this whole thing's a setup. And he was talking about how good this guy was because he was his dad's best friend. And she didn't go, actually, he's not that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
she knows, and you can see it in her. But she kind of protected him all, even from the start. And at the end, I get a little like emotional at the end when she just screams out his name because she's hurting that he's hurting. So she's protective of the whole time. But you're right, she changes throughout the film, and it's the best character arc and the best performance, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, and I think one of the things that makes it the best performance for me is that even though her character changes, her veneer is essentially the same. She has this kind of hard edge to her
Hmm.
throughout the film, and I thought that really made her a great character. So it was one of those things where she'll say something, and if you just take the tone of it, you might not get it because the tone is kind of sarcastic and what do you know, that kind of deal. But when you dig into it a little bit and you see her actions, you definitely get that her character is morphing, so to speak.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, yeah. All right. And we got some bad guys here. Uh and I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name, but the main bad guy who's trying to run everything. Um where do you put him among villains, among movie villains?
uh it's for me, I look at it as, it was to me again, you mentioned how relatable it is to now. I was looking at it going, he's just the villain we see all the time now. Like
Hmm.
he's the person putting money in politicians' pockets to get them to, like, he's a real life villain. It's not like I'm looking at Hobgoblin or
Right,
Doc Ock. It's
right.
he's a legit, or even like, whoever, Freddy Krueger. This
Yeah.
is a legit villain who really lives in my world and really does this. So when you're watching it, for me, there was even like an angsty like anger because I'm like, no, you're real and you're in
Hmm.
my world.
Hmm.
So yeah. And I think, I mean, it's funny, like when he's near the end, you see him and he's controlling the phones, and people are
Hmm.
running into him and they got pencils behind their ears. I mean, it's 1939.
Right.
So probably to people's standards today, no, he's not a crazy villain. But if you think about him in how he really exists today, then he's a pretty horrible villain, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I would definitely agree with that, because and we've spoken. I like horror films. I mean, I love Jason and the Freddy Kruegers and of the world, and I love superhero movies. So you got your Jokers and you got your Kingpins and you got this, that, and the third, the Hobgoblin, whatever. But none of them are true to life.
Yeah.
They have aspects of them that might be true to life, but they don't feel like I could go bump into them or they could affect me in some way. Whereas with him, he can definitely affect me in some way because of who he's got in his pocket.
Yes.
And so I would agree that makes him a really great villain. Let's take a break for a moment and see what the folks out here are talking about. See if anybody's talking about this movie. KB says, great movie. James, I still need to watch my copy of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington with Jimmy Stewart in. I'm sure it's great. Wildell, nice choice. Can't wait to hear your thoughts. Well, I hope you're enjoying them so far. And KB says, another reason I still want Columbia Classics Volume 1 to have that on 4K. I do not have or plan to get any of those super duper expensive sets. So,
Neither. But Stephanie told me that people are buying those sets and breaking them up and selling them individually on eBay, and you can get it actually pretty decent price. So that is one that I wouldn't mind getting individually, but I won't be buying the set
okay.
either.
Okay. I could definitely see that. Caveman, love, love, love Jimmy Stewart. Drew a life-size bust of Jimmy Stewart for a book report about him back in high school. Got an A on the picture and a D on the book report. Spent too much time on the picture, man. Yeah, you gotta, read some books and get some references. You know how that goes. Ryan, oh no, Dell and John are conspiracy theorists. Okay, man. KB really wish that Columbia Classic Volume wasn't $800 for 6 movies. I would like Mr. Smith and Jerry Maguire. I wonder if they're going to make a Volume 4, seeing that there is no shortage of 2 and 3. I have not kept up with those. I don't know if there's a shortage or what they're doing with those, but it is what it is. I like I
Yeah.
said, I don't have any interest in buying those things. They're just MSRP, 200 or 300 bucks. Is that right?
Yeah, it's super expensive, and for me, it's one of those things where I don't want all of the films in any of those sets. I don't even want the majority of them. So this individual film, I'd love to have in 4K, but not for that price. So,
Right,
yeah,
right, right. All right. So another part that I really like, and I like this about a lot of movies of the era, is the writing is good and the dialogue is just snappy is the word I like to use with it.
yeah,
Everybody's got witty comebacks and one-liners and it moves along pretty good because we get a lot of rapid fire delivery, which we'll talk about in the other movie also.
yes,
But we get a lot of that, and when we talked about our friend, one of my favorite lines in the movie, when I got here, my eyes were big blue question marks, and now they're big green dollar signs. That I thought was a brilliant line
yeah.
in the movie. Um, how did you feel about the writing overall, not just the dialogue, but the story, the way they moved it along?
I think I don't know if it was intentional, but at the beginning, I've seen this film a few times. It is a little bit slower, but I feel like it really picks up and starts moving quickly. I think the writing's great. I love there's one line he says, Jimmy Stewart's talking, he refers to Washington as the whole rotten show. And
Yes,
there is
yes.
just some like really good lines. And even, you mentioned G Willigers and stuff. I love that stuff. Like it makes me smile when they use those kind of like every once in a while. So those are funny. If you like that kind of snappy conversation, Jean Arthur is literally one of the greatest at it. And what's funny about her, like in this film, I don't know about you, but she exudes confidence and
Yes, very
power.
much so. Very much so.
Her personally, she was just a ball of anxiety. She could barely function. So she would like be terrified. Even Frank, I think Capra wrote about it once, how she would stay in her dressing room just so terrified and just struggled. And so she left her career. She ended her career very early. And because of that, which to me blows my mind because in a film like this, when I see her, I'm like, I know she's acting, but I'm like, you couldn't look more confident.
Um,
So
yeah, that I did not know that, and I'm actually I think I may have heard Stephanie mention that in when some other movie she was talking about. Um, but yeah, she definitely, like you said, exudes confidence, and for when you look at someone that's doing that, you think that even if they're not a really confident person, but it's in there somewhere. It's got to be
yes,
there for them to do it, and for her to be anxiety ridden is pretty amazing because you don't get a hint of that, not one whiff at all,
no,
at
no,
all. And she pulls it off perfectly. Um, Going to the other side of it, there are some things. Really, one main thing I did not care for in the movie, and that was the amount of montages that we got.
yes, yeah, that could have been toned down a lot.
Yes, and a lot of the montages, it was interesting because there was one shot within them that I thought if you just cut to that shot, you can eliminate the rest of the montage and we can kind of get on with it. And yeah, you've already said that they could have been toned down. But do you enjoy those or no?
Like those montages.
Yes.
No, it was like I felt like I already know he is the most patriotic person on the planet. You don't need to show me every single thing he went and saw while in DC and how much he loved those things. I
Yes.
get it. He loves America more than anything in the world. So I felt like it was just, yeah, I get it. I get it. I get it. So there's certain scenes definitely where I felt that way. And then in the whole filibuster thing, there were certain
Yes.
scenes where I'm like, can we tighten this up a little bit? Like, I
Right.
get it. Um, I get this is drawing it out, but they did it a little too much, I think.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of where I was. It was, a shot of the American flag, a shot of him here and there and all over DC and looking at these things, and I'm like, okay, I'm with you. Yes, I get it. I know you're that guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think it could the movie's a little over 2 hours, I think.
Yeah,
It you probably could have done like an hour 40 would have been you probably
yeah,
could have trimmed it
probably
to
so,
that.
probably so. And that was it's kind of a pet peeve of mine. If when you just kind of have things in the movie just to have them, and I
Yeah.
felt like a lot of those things were kind of just there, just to be there. And I don't know if that's because that's an over directing thing in this case, or someone else wanted those in the movie and he didn't have control. I'm not sure. So, but I thought that could have definitely tightened up. And the other thing is that the other thing I didn't really, not that I didn't care for, but I thought that they could have tightened up a bit. Well, you touched on it. It's a lot of the filibusters in the courtroom scenes. It's just kind of shrink those down. Give me the main points,
Yeah.
and we'll move right through the movie. Miss Caveman has joined us. She says, "Hello, everyone. Hope everyone is doing great. Thank you for hanging out with us, Miss Caveman." And all right, so let's go ahead and get ready to put a bow on this one. And oh, there was something I did want to mention before that you talked about his patriotism. I thought his brand of patriotism was interesting, and brings me back to, again, it being relevant today as opposed to the type of patriotism we get today, in that he was like, okay, yes, I love America, everything about America. I want the best for it, and I'm willing to go do the things that I really see are wrong, regardless of who's in the way, who I'm affiliated with, or whatever the case may be. Whereas opposed to today, a lot of what we get is I love America, but it has to be this way,
Yeah.
and that's regardless of which side you lean on. Um, with that in mind, I've talked about how relevant it is. Do you think this movie could be made today?
Uh, yeah, I think it could be made today, but it's interesting your point about the patriotism. That I would say, especially, so I'm Canadian, but I've lived in the US for 20 years.
Okay.
Um, so, and uh, it's in 20 years, it's very, very different in my 20 years here. And I don't know how you portray patriotism that would, because I would, in 1939, his version of patriotism would probably have encapsulated a larger percentage of the population
Mm,
than any kind of definition you would say about patriotism today. I don't know how, because it is so, there's so many divisions and so many, kind of what you were saying, like, I love America, but do it this way. Well, I love America, but do it this way.
right.
And Jimmy Stewart's character, again, he was talking about it's all creeds, it's all nationality. He was kept bringing everyone in when he would mention what America could be or what it should be. And I think you're right that there's more lines now, maybe, and more, yeah, maybe more lines, more anger. Again, I wasn't there in 39, but
Right.
yeah, I think the patriotism part would be tougher. I think the corruption part would be absolutely, you could film that and do that. It'd
Oh
be,
yes. Yeah.
but
Easy.
the patriotism part, I think you're right on that point. That would be very different.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Was curious if how you felt about that. It just struck me while I'm watching. I was like, man, is he a guy that could really exist on a screen now? And it would be tough. It would be tough. All right. So to go ahead and wrap this one up, I'm going to give my overall thoughts on Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Um, again, Jean Arthur's performance fantastic. Her character arc was fantastic. Jimmy Stewart, I think it was a good performance. It was a note that he knows how to play very well.
Mhm.
It is what I'm kind of getting out of it. It wasn't like his best performance ever, but it's a note that he really can play. Um, the dialogue really good, really snappy. Could have tightened some things up as far as the montages, the filibusters, and maybe a couple of other scenes here and there. We did get a good villain story. It's definitely still relevant. Uh, to what we're going through. And again, I don't think it's ever not been relevant, thinking of all the different eras and from 1939 and what was going on in the country. It just unfortunately just always has been something this movie can make comment on. Um, the execution of everything, I would say, really good movie. I did really enjoy this movie. I enjoyed the latter half better than the first half because we got a lot of that, the slowness. That was the other thing that I thought could have been cut down to size, was the search for him.
Yes.
It was took us a while to get to, okay, let's go after this guy.
Yeah.
We had to go through all these names and a whole list. If we got in there quicker, and like you said, if we got this done in about an hour 40 and kept it really tight, flawless. I'm not sure if I froze up or not right there, but it would probably be pretty flawless if we had, tightened it up around an hour 40, hour 45.
I agree.
But overall, I did really enjoy this movie. I would definitely call it a win. I really did. Really did like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Another one I can check off the AFI Top 100 that I've seen. Somewhere around 80, I think.
Nice.
So, some point I'm going to get there. All right. Before we move on, I was going to go back into the chat, but before I do that, even I will say to the chat, to anyone who's still here, I know we have a few people that have left. They've gone on to see Sue go into the Hall of Fame. Can't blame them. But if you're still here, hit the like button on your way out the door, or if you're staying to hang out, scroll up and down the chat. Sub to the content creators that have bothered to show up at all, because there are some great content creators out there. Definitely sub to John at Plaidx2. His information, definitely his links are in the description. And if you feel like it, if you like me enough, give me a sub too. And we just got Holland saying hey to Miss Caveman. All right, so let's switch gears now. And before you came in, I don't know if you saw any of the comments from before you got here, but one of them was, what 80s or 90s movie does Dell get John to watch? I'm developing a rep for getting people to watch movies from the 80s and 90s.
Okay.
But I threw him a curveball, a movie even older than the movie you suggested for me. And that movie is The Public Enemy, starring one James Cagney. Oh, there you go. I watched this poor DVD copy. You watched a much nicer copy.
That's a nice artwork, though. I like that artwork.
It is very, very nice artwork. And Cagney plays Tom Powers. We actually meet him as a kid before Cagney comes on the screen, and we meet him with his best friend. And the two of them they're juvenile delinquents. They're just getting into all sort of trouble. And he has an older brother named Mike, who is a straight-laced kind of guy. And so we see him getting into some trouble as kids, and they take up with a guy named Putty Face. And he's, he kind of a fence, I guess, or kind of a mentor in the way of life that they're going to end up in. And of course, they wind up in jail, and Putty Face is kind of at fault here because they do some things, and he kind of shuns them when he's looking for help to get out of the situation. Come out of jail, and he starts working for another guy. And of course, Prohibition starts around that time. So what do you do but start selling alcohol, start selling beer? And that's where they make a ton of money, and we get to see the effects of that. All right, so The Public Enemy, and when it starts, one of the things is, I don't know if you knew this, but we get the two kids that play Tom and suddenly I'm drawing a blank on his name, the friend. But we get the two kids here, and one thing you might not have known is that Cagney was supposed to play the friend.
Okay.
Yeah. And after a while, it became apparent that Cagney was the powerhouse actor that he is, or that he was, and they switched roles, which might be hard to tell in black and white, but you can see the hair is different from when they grow up. But that is a reason for that. So that was interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah. So how did you think about that setup? What did you think about that?
That intro setup.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually, it's funny when as soon as it started, and your comment on the last film with having kids involved, it actually reminded me of Angels with Dirty Faces, which is
Yes.
also Cagney,
Yes.
also kids who are delinquents growing up. And
Yes.
so as soon as the film started, I was like, oh man, I know this film, or I know this feel of the film. So yeah, I love that part. And it did remind me of the other film. And yeah, so yeah, I like that setup. And it does give you a good background. This film isn't super long, so it was background, but it wasn't too much background. It was just enough background on these kids and what they experienced growing up.
Yeah. We said Mr. Smith Goes to Washington ran, I think, 2 hours and 4 minutes, 2 hours and 5 minutes, somewhere
Yeah.
in there. This movie was over in 74 minutes, I think.
Yes.
So it's a breeze to get
Yeah.
to get
Very
through.
much so.
It's like an episode of Stranger Things. It's that short. Um, so we meet Cagney, and I'm not even going to ask about Cagney yet. I'm going to save him just for a little bit.
Okay.
What do you think about Putty Face, the guy who was?
He was. They do a good job with these gangster films of just like you can tell they're slimy characters, like just how they look, their tone, how they move, everything. They're slimy. They're scoundrels. Using probably 1930s language, they're
Yes,
scoundrels.
yeah,
Um, yeah, so you definitely get that feel. You get the feel of I'm not here for you, but I'm here for you, but I'm using you, and
yeah.
you do get that feel. Like it's yeah, you definitely get that feel.
You definitely, absolutely get that feel. The other character was the best friend, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to look up his name really quick because I'm so far losing his name. But played by Edward Woods is the actor, and it's not on the back of here. But anyway, well, what do you think of him as a character overall?
I enjoyed the play between the two of them, so I thought it was a really good back and forth between Cagney and this fella. And the car, one of my favorite scenes was the car drive when they're driving and they come across Jean Harlow's character.
Yes, excellent
That's
scene.
one of my favorite scenes between he's just giving it to him. They're just giving it back and forth, and they're there for each other. They care about each other, but they give it to each other. That was one of my favorite scenes between the two of them.
Yeah, they give it to each other pretty constantly, that's for sure. And Matt was his name, Matt Doyle. And in that particular scene, he goes to say his name to Jean Harlow. He's as smitten as Tom is
Yeah.
with her, and I think when we get to Cagney, this really for me was one of the best parts of his performance was this scene
Hmm.
and just the look on his face, and you can really see the stars in his eyes. I mean, you can
Yeah.
literally see it. And Matt kind of sits up, and he's kind of also staring at her, gazing at her. And after Tom gives his name and tells her how to get in contact with him, Matt starts on and says, "Hi, Matt." He doesn't have a name, so and that was a great back and forth between them. How about the older brother, Mike?
I thought he did a good. I mean, I did laugh. I mean, it's the 30s. Every time he punched Cagney, I was like, "That's the weakest punch I've ever seen."
Yes.
I was like, "How is Cagney dropping like a sack of potatoes after that thing?" But it was good. He was the straight laced brother. He was, I got to do everything right, brother. He was, and you could see in his tone of his face, the look of his face, he was that brother. Everything is got to do it this way, got to do it right, and play by the rules. And you could get that feel from him, the jealousy between them, because he's not bringing in the money like Cagney's bringing in the money, but he's doing all the right things. So I thought the brother did a good job of conveying that angst between the two, but at the same time, he cared about him. Like his brother mattered to him,
Right.
but he didn't stand for what his brother was doing.
Right. And I thought that was a really good contrast between the two of them. He, yeah, he embodied everything that you just said. Yeah, he's not bringing in the money, but he's doing things the right way, trying to do things the right way, and trying to be protective of his mom.
Mhm.
And at some points, he's actually even protective of his brother,
Yes.
even though he can't really do the things that his brother would do. Which I'm going to come back to the brother in a little bit when we get closer to talking about the end of the movie. Um, I guess now we need to talk about Cagney. And for me, the film almost lives and dies with him.
Yeah.
What did you think about Cagney here?
So Cagney is, it's funny. When I started watching the film, I have a handful of Cagney films, not a ton. Um, and he wouldn't be one that I would go to. If I used to pull out a movie from the 30s, I'm not going to think Cagney. But when I was watching this film and he came on the screen, I was like, I like him, but the more the film goes, it's like, this guy is so stinking cool. Like the swagger he has.
Hmm.
And you mentioned the older brother, the difference. The brother had a different gait to how he walked.
Yes.
And Cagney has a totally different gait of how he walks. And that communicates his confidence and it communicates his swagger. Um, so yeah, I Cagney's great. And I did look it up as I was watching. I was like, how old is he? And he was only 32 when he was filming this. So he was a pretty young man at the time.
Yeah, he was, and yeah, that confidence is just like we talked about Gene Arthur in the other film. It's pouring off of him. It's kind of drawn into him.
Yes.
No matter what you think of him as a person, the character that is not Cagney, but Tom Powers. No matter what you think of him as a person, he's magnetic. You know, every word he says, you start to hang on, and that rapid fire delivery is just it's amazing. At least in my eyes. I'm not sure how you feel about that.
Oh, he's so good. And if you've seen Angels with Dirty Faces, same thing.
Yes,
It's like
I have.
machine gun fire and it's on point. There's no stuttering, there's no slipping, slurring. It's just so intensely accurate. And yeah, he's confidence man, swagger. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, quintessential gangster for sure.
Yes. Yes. And I hadn't watched this film in a long time, so I rewatched it just before for a refresher also. And I had forgotten how slyly funny this film is.
Mhm.
There were lots of humorous moments, and I thought that his comic timing was really good. With the rapid fire, just firing off those lines like that, but
Mhm.
he knew when to pause so that you got it and
Yes.
could chuckle. Not maybe not a deep belly laugh, but you had a chuckle because he gave you that space to go. Okay, laugh here, got right there. And I
Yes.
thought his comic timing was really, really good with that. Him and again, Matt, his partner Matt Doyle. I thought they worked really well together as a comic team almost. Um, so how about the writing of the story though? We know that he was great. How about the writing of the story?
I thought it was, again, the film wasn't that long. I thought it was pretty tight. Um, Yeah. So, you said we're going to chat about the end a little bit,
Yeah,
in a
yeah,
little
yeah,
bit.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I thought it was pretty tight. I thought there were moments, his crossing paths again with Putty Nose or Putty Face. That was pretty intense, really well written, and really
Yes,
well filmed.
yes,
Especially, I mean, this is pre-code, so you
yes,
were able to get away with a few things that you weren't able to a few years later. Um, I thought it was well written, well filmed. The ending, how that was written, again, I was like, oh wow. I was like, I
hmm
didn't see that coming.
hmm
That would be the end. Um, yeah. So I thought it was really well written. Obviously, again, as you mentioned with the other films in this era, for what you were saying, was super sharp and fast and witty. Uh, yeah. So I thought it was great. I enjoyed it.
Okay, okay. All right. So I do have a couple of comments here. Uh, James says Cagney is a hole in my film journey. I need to check out more of his films. And I'm like you. I have a handful of his movies that I've seen, so I definitely need to see more. Um, but everything that I've seen him in, I've really liked him in. Um, and Emmett always comes in with questions, and I love Emmett for this. And they're not always related to what we're talking about, which is fine. He says, "What do you guys hate about the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street? Uh, but like about the originals? Okay, reboots. I'm guessing that's reboot.
Okay.
But like about the originals. Have you seen the reboots to these movies?
I have seen none of these movies,
Okay,
not even the originals.
okay.
So
All right, so I guess I'll have to handle this one. Okay.
this is all you, Del.
All right. So for starters, I do not hate the Friday the 13th reboot. I actually like it. It's one of the better Friday the 13th movies as far as I'm concerned. Uh the characters might be a little too one-dimensional or a little too stupid, but that's par for the course with a Friday the 13th movie. So I really do like that one. And the Nightmare on Elm Street reboot, and I don't actually hate that one. I dislike it, but I don't really hate it. And one of the things I do like though is that it it goes into Freddy Krueger's backstory a little more, and a lot of people don't like that about it. They say it gives away too much or it's too on the nose. And I actually enjoyed that part. I actually enjoyed Jackie Earl Haley as Freddy Krueger. I didn't like the teenage characters in that reboot, and I thought the movie stretched out too long. I hope that answers the question, Emmett. Um, all right, getting back to the Public Enemy. So let's go ahead into this ending a little bit. We're gonna try not to spoil it because I got some people here who have not seen a Cagney movie or not too many Cagney movies. So my first thing is we get his brother is told what happened because we see he's getting into a bad situation and it becomes worse. So if you're his brother, are you reacting that way? Because his brother, I will give this part away. He's pretty much told to just hang out and stay by the phone. Are you doing that if that's your brother?
So which part are you talking about?
The he after the hospital.
Oh yeah. Whew. No, especially like knowing what he was into. You know, I feel like that was shocking to me. That whole end thing. Yeah, how that was written. It was pretty emotional, and yeah, with the mom especially. Like, and
Yes.
and you don't see outcome. It's just like, hey, here's the end, and you're
Yep.
like,
Yep.
holy cow! Like, what about? And you're left with, how is this going to be, and what's this? I thought that was pretty impressive.
Yes, yes, that was definitely impressive. And now, so I'm going to throw it back to you again, though. So with the brother, now you said you probably wouldn't have done that, just kind of hang out by the phone if that's your brother. But if you're that guy, if you're Mike and you're kind of this straight laced guy, what are you going to do?
And my brother's in the hospital.
Yeah, well, not anymore. He's not in the hospital because of what happened.
Right. Man, I don't know. I mean, he's the straight laced brother, so he's going to do the right thing.
Uh,
And you can tell he has a very much a, I've got to be with my mom. So I'm a firstborn in my family.
so am I.
And okay, and typically firstborns are rule followers. And the secondborn is, let's just have a good, let's party. Let's just do whatever. And then you get your third is usually, if you have three, you get the baby. I'm the firstborn. I'm the rule follower. So I'm not going to, I'm doing the right thing, whatever the right thing is. That's
Right.
me personally, because and I can't handle the anxiety of not doing that right thing.
Man, that is, yeah, sounds like my life. Sounds like my life. But you mentioned that you really you couldn't see the end coming,
No.
um, and it was really well filmed. And I'm trying not to spoil it again still.
It's
So,
hard.
but there is the one shot that's kind of the shocking shot, and then there's that one more shot that's kind of an
Yes.
aftermath that we close the curtains on. And at that moment, what's kind of running through your head there?
Um, I mean, there's a part of me that's like, okay, I can't wait to see the sequel because I want to know what he did.
Right.
But there's that look on his face of he might not be the good clean cut brother anymore. You know,
Interesting.
that's
Interesting.
the kind of the one of the things. I mean, you could go with, hey, this is the life he signed up for. This is how it is. But there's the other part of me with the look on his face going, he might handle this. You know.
Okay. Okay. I hadn't given any credence to the idea that he might not be the clean cut brother anymore.
Okay.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
Um, I feel like him emotionally, if he was going to stay pure and good, it would have been more emotional, maybe like more. He would have, yeah, just emoted over it more. It feels like he got cold and dark, and the look on his face, anyway,
Mm-hmm.
and his reaction. I'm thinking if I'm in that situation, I'm reacting very different than how he reacted, and it was kind of ominous that last shot and where the camera
Very.
was positioned
Yes.
and how he navigated. So yeah, there's a part of me that was like, I wonder if he's handling it now. If he had his John Wick moment and he's like, all right.
Yeah, that could be it. Could be that kind of sequel. I mean, if they were into that kind of thing in the 30s, for sure.
Yeah.
We could definitely go that route.
I ever thought, when you mentioned the dial or the writing of it, I don't know if we want to quote. Are we allowed to quote any lines from
Yeah,
this?
sure. Go ahead. Go for it.
When the scene where he talks about beer and blood, and he
Yeah.
follows up to his brother and says, "Your hands ain't so clean. You killed and liked it. You didn't get them medals for holding hands with them Germans." I was like,
Yes.
"Holy cow!"
That was a powerful line. Yes.
And there was all of a sudden the clean cut brother, depending on where you land with all this stuff, isn't as clean cut as, you know what I mean? James is saying we're not that different, man. Like, so that was a powerful scene. It was intense.
Yes. Yes, it was. It was. One last thing I want to ask about the grapefruit scene. What'd you think of that?
So I'm a gentleman, and
Yeah.
you just don't do that stuff. And for the 30s, that was very shocking,
Yeah.
And even for today, though, I looked at it and I was like, buddy, like
Yeah.
it showed how cold, like his disregard. Yeah, that was pretty intense. It's a famous scene. I did some reading afterwards and read that it is a very famous scene in that movie.
Yes, it is. It is. And I lied because there is one more because that brought to mind a little later in the movie. They're hiding out at their guy's house, and do we get a rape scene?
At the other guy's house.
They're they're
Oh
they're,
yeah,
they're hiding out, and the wife
yeah,
kind of comes on to old Tom.
yeah. I think you're right.
Uh,
And his reaction the next day, he seems completely oblivious to it. So yeah, it's very possible. And again, this is pre-code, because when that scene was unfolding, I was like, "This is the 30s. I don't think you can do this."
right.
And then I looked it up afterwards, and I was like, "Oh, this is pre-code film,
Pre-code,
or
yeah.
just on the cusp of it." And I 100% think you're right. I think there was an assault. He was
Mhm.
actually the victim of an assault.
Yes. And I think if that movie is made today, a bigger deal might be made of it.
I agree.
Um, but for that time, it was. I guess we could call it a justifiable slap at that time for
Yeah,
that one.
that was
Um,
intense. That, and then the Mr. Putty Nose, or Putty
yeah.
Face, whatever his name is, when they cross paths again and go back to his place,
Yes.
that scene was, dude, it was haunting. And how the whole thing played out, and then what the camera did was
Hmm.
like, whoof, this is a
Yeah.
legit gangster film.
Yes. Absolutely. We think we're going to get the thing, we think we're gonna get it, the shown what's happening. But yeah, when the camera pans away, and that's a art that's kind of lost, I think.
Hmm.
We so focused on being able to show all this gore and all the effects, and we can do it now with the computer or even with practical effects. If you do that, that we forget that sometimes what you don't see is better
Yeah,
than what you do. And
definite.
it wasn't one of those things like in horror movies today. If you're trying to go for a PG-13 rating, so to speak, they'll cut from a kill, but it's very clearly just because they're trying to get a PG-13 rating. It's like an instant, jerk of the camera, and it doesn't really have the same effect. But here, it's not done for a rating. It was, yeah, we can't really show this, so it's similar in that vein, but it's like, how much more powerful is it the way we're going to do it here? And it's not a quick move. The camera kind of slowly
Yeah.
goes away, and then you hear
Yes.
what happens. And I thought that was just fantastic.
Yeah, it made it way more haunting. If you'd shown what you think happens, then it'd be like, okay, whatever. But how they filmed it, how they did it, it was like it was way more haunting.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so now it's time to put you on the spot, Mr. John. Go ahead and give me your overall thoughts on this movie. And did you like it? Did you dislike it? Just go for it.
Overall thoughts on it, I really did like it. I'm a huge fan again. If you've been to my channel, 30s, 40s, massive fan. Opening credits, I had the biggest smile on my face as each actor and actress looked straight down the camera
Yes,
lens.
yes.
I was just like, this is the best. I love these kind of movies. And then I did love, again, this is because that era, you had the thing at the beginning and the thing at the end, the card going, we don't condone violence. Like,
Yes.
James Cagney's not a good guy. But I was like, dude, for the last 88 minutes, he was the coolest guy on the planet, So it was kind of like, we have to say this, but also, isn't he super cool?
Uh-huh.
So I loved the innocence mixed with we're a little bit naughty doing a gangster movie in the 30s.
Yeah.
So I loved all of that. Again, what we just talked about, the scene with Putty, the closing scene was really well written. I think the one thing that was a drawback for me, and this might be just my own ignorance, Jean Harlow, her performance in there, it wasn't very big. It was a pretty small performance.
Mhm.
And I honestly, I didn't get her. I didn't see why. And I admittedly haven't seen any of her films. I know she's regarded as one of the greats, but I didn't get that from the film. Like, I was expecting, because she is such a legend, that it was going to be a bigger impact in the story. But I was like, oh, okay. And
Right.
it was it. There was, a couple of scenes. So that was, for me, I was waiting for something that never happened because of who she is. So I don't know if that's that just might be me. No, but overall, I thought it was super well written. How they did the camera work was really great. There was enough, oh goodness gracious, innocence of the 30s with some stuff that was like, even today, that would be, oh, wow, that's pretty intense.
Right.
You mentioned the what happened to him with that woman. So it was gritty with the 30s stuff that I typically watch, enjoy. And it's Cagney. So if you want to see a gangster movie, then you see it with Cagney because he kills it. So I thought it was great. I would say that my biggest negative was the Jean Harlow part. If you bring in someone of her caliber, I didn't feel like she was used, or maybe I just missed it. But with the exception of the scene where they're kind of both in awe of her,
Yes.
with the exception of that, the next scene, I didn't get it. And I think that was her last scene when he's trying to leave and she stops him from leaving. I think that's this.
I think so.
Yeah. And so I just was like, oh, I didn't get it. But killer gangster movie. I'd definitely watch it again. And I'd want to watch the brothers interact more on a second time through. And then the end, kind of you mentioned, I wouldn't mind watching that again and thinking through what happened next,
Right.
because it does leave it open.
Yeah, it leaves it pretty wide open as to what's
Yeah.
going to happen next.
Yeah,
So
man, I liked it. So I'm glad you recommended that one. When I was going through the list that you sent me, I was like, oh, I think I have that in a collection. And so I was super excited because it forced me to watch it.
cool. Glad to do it. Glad that you enjoyed it. All right, so that's gonna pretty much do it. One last time, I'm gonna let you take over the stage and just let people know where to find you. Anything you have coming up on your channel, that whole outro kind of thing.
Thanks, Del, for having me on. This was a lot of fun. As I told you, I've watched quite a few of these episodes of the movie swaps, and I'm always, even at the very beginning, I'm always wondering what's the next movie. After I hear the first one, I'm just so interested what the next one is. So thanks. This was a ton of fun, and it was fun doing movies from the 30s with you. Plaidx2, you can find me on Instagram and YouTube under the same name. And videos coming out. We've got a lot of Criterion content coming out due to the sale, and a haul video and an episode of the 5 with Dell. So yeah, that's what's coming up next.
All right, very cool. So yeah, you mentioned the 30s. I forgot to ask this question at the beginning. I meant to ask this. We talked about the thumbnail in the DMs a little bit with the hats. Did you get a kick out of that?
What part? What did you say?
The thumbnail with the hats that I sent for this.
When I saw it, I just burst out laughing, man. When I got it, you messaged me, DM'd me on Instagram, and I just burst out laughing. I was like, "That's ridiculous! Super funny, very appropriate for these films." Because even in the Mr. Smith, there's that whole scene where he's fiddling with his hat when he's talking to the girl he really likes.
Yeah.
And then
It comes
obviously
a couple times, and
with the
somebody else
gangsters.
grabs it and puts it on it. And
Yeah.
the gangsters. Yeah.
So it's very appropriate for both films.
All right. So on this channel, guys, I do not have a movie swap for next week. I may pop up on another channel, but that's not set in stone yet. If it happens or if it becomes set in stone, I will let you guys know. So it'll be a couple of more weeks before I get to a movie swap, and that will be the 17th. And I will have Dave from the 4K Lowdown on. And then later that week on the 20th, I will be on his channel doing High Five. We'll be grading some movies over there. And of course, tomorrow, check me out on Convicted Cinephiles channel. That's Derek from Convicted Cinephile. That gets to be a mouthful. We're going to try to figure out what the greatest superhero movie of all time is as we go through his superhero movie tournament. That is all that I have for you guys. John, thank you again for coming to hang out with me over here. Really appreciate it. I had a blast.
Thanks, man. I had a lot of fun.
All right.